In 1990, the entire Internet consisted of fewer than 300,000 connected computers worldwide, and almost nobody outside a small circle of scientists had even heard of it. There was no Google, no email for ordinary people, no way to send a single photo across the planet in seconds. And yet, that fragile, obscure network was about to become the most important invention since electricity. So what if it had never made it past 1990? What if the plug had been pulled right then, before the World Wide Web existed, before anyone outside a university lab even knew what a browser was? The answer is stranger and more unsettling than you might think. Today we're going to rewind the clock to a world standing right on the edge of a digital explosion and ask what would have happened if that explosion had been stopped cold. We'll look at the businesses that never would have existed, the wars that might have played out differently, the diseases that may have spread further, and the everyday conveniences you use right now that simply would not be there. Some of what we uncover will feel obvious. Some of it will completely surprise you. By the end, you'll understand just how close we came to a very different version of the modern world, and how one piece of technology quietly rewired almost everything about human life. Let's set the scene. In 1990, the Internet wasn't the global, sprawling thing we know today. It was a research tool, mostly used by universities, government labs, and the military. Tim Berners-Lee was still putting the finishing touches on something called the World Wide Web, a project he wouldn't officially launch until the following year. Most people had never sent an email. Most businesses had never heard the word website because websites didn't exist yet. Phones were attached to walls. Letters took days to arrive. If you wanted to know something, you opened an encyclopedia, and if the encyclopedia didn't have it, you simply didn't know it. Now imagine a single decision, a single policy shift, a single catastrophic event, anything that causes this fragile new network to be shut down entirely in 1990. No restarting it, no do-overs, it's gone. At first, almost nobody would notice. That's the unsettling part. The average person on the street in Cleveland or Manchester or Sydney wouldn't feel a thing because they were never using it in the first place. Life would look exactly the same on the surface, but underneath that surface, a chain reaction would have already been quietly disrupted, one that was about to reshape banking, communication, science, entertainment, and eventually the entire global economy. Think about that for a second. The most world-changing piece of technology in modern history could have disappeared, and for years, almost nobody would have known what they were missing. Let's talk about what we would have lost first, because some of these losses would have happened almost immediately, even if nobody noticed them right away. Email, as we know it, never spreads beyond a small technical community. Without it, businesses keep relying entirely on fax machines and phone calls well into the 2000s and beyond. Communication stays slower, more expensive, and more local. International collaboration between scientists, something that exploded in the 1990s thanks to early internet connections, slows to a crawl. Research that once took weeks to share between labs on different continents instead takes months, sometimes years, moving through printed journals and snail mail. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Human Genome Project, one of the most important scientific achievements in history, depended heavily on global data sharing made possible by early internet infrastructure. Researchers across different countries needed to exchange massive amounts of genetic data quickly. Without that kind of digital collaboration, a project that was completed in 2003 could have been delayed by years, possibly even a decade. And it's not just science. Picture the financial world. Banks in the 1990s began shifting toward early digital transaction systems. Without the Internet's backbone, this transition slows dramatically. Stock trading stays dependent on phone calls and physical paper trails for far longer. The kind of split-second automated trading that defines modern Wall Street simply doesn't exist in the same way. Markets move slower, information moves slower, and when information moves slower, the entire global economy moves slower with it.
This is where you start to feel the chill of what we're describing. We're not just talking about losing cat videos and social media. We're talking about losing the nervous system that connects science, finance, and global cooperation.
Now let's go somewhere even more unsettling. How a missing internet would have changed the way wars and conflicts unfolded. The Internet's earliest version, ARPANET, was built by the U.S. Department of Defense specifically to create a communication system that could survive a nuclear attack, one with no single point of failure. If that early framework collapses in 1990, military and intelligence agencies don't lose the Internet exactly, because at that point it was already largely a defense and research tool. But what they lose is the foundation that the modern Internet was built on top of. Without that civilian expansion, satellite communication, encrypted digital messaging, and real-time intelligence sharing between allied nations develop on a completely different timeline. Some experts who study military technology suggest this could have meaningfully slowed advances in coordinated, multi-country military operations throughout the 1990s and 2000s. But what happened next completely changed everything, because the ripple effects don't stop with governments and armies. They reach all the way down into your living room. Without the Internet, the 1990s play out very differently for ordinary families. There's no easy way to research a medical symptom before going to the doctor. There's no instant access to consumer reviews before buying a car. There's no way to compare prices between 5 different stores without driving to each one. Consumers stay almost entirely dependent on advertising and salespeople for information, with far less ability to fact-check or push back. The balance of power between buyers and sellers, which the Internet eventually flipped dramatically in favor of consumers, simply never tips that way. Companies keep more control. Customers stay more in the dark.
Now let's talk about something a lot of people don't expect: how a missing internet might have changed how diseases spread and how the world responded to them. In the real timeline, modern public health relies heavily on rapid digital communication. When the SARS outbreak occurred in 2002 and 2003, health officials used early internet-based reporting systems to track and share information across borders faster than ever before in history. Without that infrastructure already established and mature, similar future outbreaks could have spread further before anyone outside the immediate region even realized something was wrong. Fast forward to a hypothetical 2020 in this alternate timeline. A new virus emerges, but there's no internet to allow scientists in different countries to instantly share genetic sequencing data. There's no way for health agencies to coordinate in real time. There's no way for ordinary people to look up symptoms, track case counts, or receive instant updates from health officials. Information that in our real timeline traveled around the world within days instead crawls through printed reports and delayed international phone calls. The response to a global health crisis, already difficult with modern tools, becomes exponentially harder without them. This is the part that tends to hit people the hardest. We don't usually think of the internet as a life-saving piece of infrastructure. We think of it as entertainment, as social media, as a place to watch videos like this one. But underneath all of that, it became one of the most important tools humanity has ever built for protecting itself from disease, disaster, and disinformation, even though it can sometimes spread disinformation too.
Now let's bring it back to something a little more personal, because so far we've talked about governments, science, and global health, but what about the small, everyday things that quietly disappear in this alternate world? No streaming services. Movie nights stay built entirely around physical video rental stores and broadcast television schedules. No social media, meaning the entire culture of viral trends, internet fame, and instant global conversations around major events never develops in the same way. News still spreads, but it spreads through newspapers, radio, and television, controlled by a much smaller number of large media organizations. Online shopping never becomes the dominant force it is today. Major companies that built empires on internet infrastructure either never exist at all or grow into something completely different, built around catalogs, physical stores, and phone orders instead. Dating changes dramatically too. Without internet-based dating platforms, the way people meet partners stays far more dependent on geography, social circles, and chance encounters. Some researchers who study relationship trends have noted that online dating eventually became one of the most common ways couples meet in the real world. In our alternate timeline, that shift never happens, and millions of relationships that exist today simply never form because the two people involved never had a digital reason to cross paths. Even your sense of time changes. Without constant digital updates, breaking news, and notifications, daily life moves at a fundamentally slower pace. Some people might call that peaceful, others would call it isolating. Either way, it's almost impossible to overstate just how different the texture of everyday life would feel.
So here's the biggest insight, the one thing that ties all of this together. The internet wasn't just a tool we added on top of an already functioning world. It became the connective tissue underneath nearly every major system we depend on: science, medicine, finance, defense, relationships, and culture itself. If it had shut down in 1990, before it had the chance to grow into what it became, the world wouldn't look dramatically different at first glance. No flying cars would vanish, no buildings would collapse. But underneath that calm surface, decades of human progress would have unfolded on a slower, more isolated, more fragmented timeline. Discoveries would arrive years later than they did. Crises would be harder to coordinate against, and billions of human connections that exist today simply never would have happened. The internet didn't just change what we do, it changed who we are able to become, both individually and as a species. And the wildest part is, in 1990, almost nobody could have predicted that. We came incredibly close to a version of history where this all stayed locked inside university labs and government servers, a quiet experiment that never became anything more. Instead, it grew into the invisible foundation of modern civilization. The next time your phone buzzes with a notification, or you order something with one click, or you video call someone on the other side of the planet, remember this: none of it was guaranteed. It was built, piece by piece, by people who had no idea just how much the world was about to change. And somewhere out there, in a parallel version of 1990, there's a timeline where none of it ever happened at all.